think so. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone to today's competitive grant proposal writing masterclass. This class is sponsored by Valley Vision and is focused on equipping participants in the We Prosper Together Capital Region Catalyst Pre-Development Project RFP, which is a mouthful. We will be focused today on, or we will be referencing the RFP today, but all of the tools and resources and discussion is also applicable more broadly. And as a reminder, I am not part of the RFP review process, and those who are from Valley Vision aren't participating today. So while I hope that this course will help you all submit really killer RFPs, this is not going to guarantee you funding, and just wanted to make sure you have that reminder. As I just mentioned, this is being recorded, and we will send it to you afterwards as well. To start off, I'd love to just introduce myself, and then we'll do some introductions for the group. My name is Sarah, and I'll be teaching today's class as well as 2 in-person classes that build on the content from today at the end of May and in early June. Going in reverse order on this slide, I'll start with the last bullet. I really love cause-driven work that makes a difference. I grew up in Kenya. I was the daughter of missionaries in a small rural community. And I've seen firsthand how good cause-driven work can make a really big difference in impact, and also how not so good work that isn't organized well can have a negative effect. So the approach and effectiveness matter so much. I enjoy volunteering both locally and for causes focused back in Kenya and East Africa. On the personal front, I'm married to Jason, who was my middle school sweetheart, and we have 3 kids. After almost over a decade living in the Bay Area in Sunnyvale, we recently relocated to Orangeville. And on the professional front, I started doing grant proposal writing actually for a Girl Scout council in Rancho Cordova in their fund development department when I was in college. I then went on to become the grant proposal writer for a Boy Scout council and started their grant program up from scratch, and then to work for the YMCA of San Joaquin County. I loved the storytelling. I loved getting funders to care about the work that we were doing and to invest, partnering with really amazing people who cared so much about the community that they were working in, and winning grants, which is also very, very fun. So for the last 14 years, though, I've worked in tech in the Bay Area at a startup, at Google, and at Intuit. And I've worked in sales, strategy, business operations, and product, and then have spent the last 5 years in executive leadership roles, most recently as vice president at Intuit. 2 of my superpowers are making the complex simple and getting people to care and to take action. So to do this, I use the same storytelling foundation that I initially built as a grant proposal writer, and then in sales, and then from my years in corporate tech, and writing documents like strategy papers, business cases for investment. These are sort of sister and brother documents to the grant proposal. And I've been on both sides of these requests as both the person who is asking for investment and the person deciding where to invest. So this workshop brings together my background in fund development and grants and those 14 years of corporate tech experience. And I've seen again and again how strong storytelling can really accelerate impact, and poor storytelling can hinder it. And I hope that today we will give you some tools to help you really accelerate your impact. I love coaching teams and individuals, and I'm excited to share some of the techniques and best practices that I found helpful and that hopefully will be helpful for you on this RFP as well as others that you might be working on. Few housekeeping items as we get started. We've got 3 hours today, which is a big time investment. And so to make the most of the session, I recommend that you do have paper and pen, something that you can write with so that you can write down key takeaways. I also encourage you right now to go ahead and close out the things that will distract you. So if you have Slack open, your email open, your phone is right there, just turn it over, exit out of those things, tuck those things away, and bring your focus here so that you can really get the most out of this session. Otherwise, they will distract you. And finally, please participate. We have a big group, but this is a very interactive class, and there will be opportunities to contribute. I know sometimes you've got to hop off of the video, or for whatever reason you can't be on video, but if you can, please go ahead and put your video on and be ready to jump in and participate as we go along. Okay, so I'd love to get to know all of you a little bit. We will do this in the chat. Please introduce yourself there in the comments and include your name, your organization, and something you love about your county. That's county, not country, something you love about your county. So put that in the group chat, introduce yourself. And then once you've done that, on your own paper and with your own pen, write down what you would rate yourself, what you would rate your grant proposal writing confidence on a scale of 1 to 10 and why. And then secondly, what are you hoping to gain from today's session? Thank you for everyone who's noting the reason they're off camera. We look forward to seeing you soon. Totally fine. In your intro, make sure you include something you love about your county. The mountains and lakes. Yes, lots of beauty. Yep, more nature, love it. And then once you've introduced yourself, make sure you do give yourself that rating of how you would score your confidence level and what are some things that you hope to take away from today. Yeah, I love the location as well, accessibility to so many different things. The diversity, great answers. Thank you, Crystal. We will actually have you share this live. So thanks for putting it there. You can also just keep your rating on your own notebook and then write down some of the things that you hope to learn personally, and we'll talk about a few in a minute. Awesome. Lots of beautiful nature, lots of comments about the people, the diversity, the closeness of communities, welcoming. Awesome. This is great. So let's go ahead and share some of the self-assessments that we did. So how you would rate your confidence, and then what are some things you're hoping to take away today. So we had a few folks who went above and beyond and even put this in the chat. So Nate, why don't you go ahead first and tell us, you said confidence level is a 2 since you've never written any grants. So what are you hoping that this class will give you today?
Yeah, I think just kind of like the basic structure of like what's really important to include in a grant and how to set yourself apart since there are so many grant writers out there. For me, a lot of the work I do revolves around grants we receive. So yeah, I'm just looking to get like a really solid understanding and like what kind of needs to be front and center when writing grants.
Awesome. Thank you. And Sarah, on the other end, it looks like you've written quite a few grant proposals in the past. Could you tell us a little bit more about your rating and what rating you gave yourself and what you're hoping for from today?
So in the past, I've worked at the Skoll Foundation, so I was on the side of looking at grants. And then I also wrote grants at First Five YOLO, as well as where I'm employed currently at Child Impact. But then on a smaller scale, I did it for the PTA at Davis Joint Unified School District at 2 different schools, as well as, well, actually 3, I guess. And then for sports boosters within the same school district. And then a bunch of random other fundraisers we've done besides sports.
Awesome. So you're hoping today, you said, to meet proper replanning level balance, like finding the right mix of how much to plan ahead versus not as you're preparing? Or you're talking?
Yes.
Okay.
The only feedback we got, because we submitted to the first application round, and the only feedback we got was the only weakness was to develop your environmental portion a little more. And then also that it was like pretty planned out. And if
Okay.
it could kind of not be as planned out.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, your experience having read grant proposals that other people have submitted will be a superpower for you, and we're gonna come back to that later in the class too, so that's great to know. Chelsea,
Okay.
how about you? What did you rate yourself?
Well, I'm pretty confident in my grant abilities, but I always feel like there's a lot to learn. And so I'm hoping to find out some great nuggets from you today. And I've done a lot of work further in the North States, so I feel like it's a little bit different in Sacramento in that region. So I'm hoping to kind of see what those differences are.
Cool, glad to have you. David, how about you? And I think we have two Davids, so let's do David Little.
I think I'd give myself a 10 as a writer and a 5 as a grant writer, so that equals about 7.5. Grant writing is a whole different animal, and I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about, just the right buzzwords and things that attract a grader's attention.
Yep, okay, great. Let's get maybe one or two more. Jody?
Hi, I have to agree with David. Somewhere in the middle, done more with actually facilitating and carrying out the work than the grant writing, but have done some grant writing. I guess the feedback was really not very dynamic on our first round, and so I'm trying to learn what exactly is being looked for and how do I meet those requirements.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing. George, would you mind sharing your rating?
Hi. I would say I'm maybe a 3. I'm pretty new to grant writing and just community work here in the region, so happy to learn more.
Cool. Well, glad to have you. Well, the theme that I heard from all of you, whether you have a lot of experience or a little experience, is just sort of that, like, how do I crack the formula? How do I get to more certainty? And the goal for today is really to help you 10x your confidence. So, there's not always a perfect formula or a, single way to win the grant proposal process, but there are a lot of ways to help you really increase your confidence as you think about tips and tricks that you can use as you're working on your funding proposals. So as we get started, I have a question for you. And again, we're going to have this be live discussion. So go ahead and jump off of mute, jump in, or I'll call on you. But what makes an effective funding proposal? What do you all think goes into it? Jillian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say maybe like a call to action that might resonate with the reader.
Yeah, that one's great. And Kayla in the chat says responds to the prompts for sure. Definitely respond to the prompts. What else? What else makes for an effective funding proposal?
I would say that there's a clear impact.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Patricia. Anything else? Measurable outcomes. Yep, for sure.
I think storytelling, being able to have a solid grant narrative.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Now another question, second question. What makes an effective nonprofit or cause-driven organization? So when you think of the organization that's behind the proposal, what makes an effective organization? Don't feel like it's too obvious. You can jump in and say it. Nate, what do you think? What makes an effective organization?
I guess having clear goals and outcomes. I mean, I feel like that's pretty common all around.
Yeah. Sarah, what else?
That people are actually better off for the work you've done, and that you've been able to actually quantify who needs this help. And if you're actually serving the majority of those individuals in an effective way, and that you're continually improving every year to make sure you reach everyone who needs that help.
Yeah, that was a great list of many different things, but basically that effective organization is actually doing things that change people's lives, make a difference, and then doing it and making it better. Any other ones that people think of? Anything that you would add, David? SPAR? SPAR, is it?
Yeah, thanks, Spar. For the organization, it's having a clear focus and strategy on the direction that you want to go and being able to be impactful and measure your progress along the way towards success.
Awesome. And you guys are a chatty bunch in the chat, so I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat too. Past successful work examples, so you're credible, you're able to do the things you say, clearly articulating what funds will be used. Those were some of the things for the grant proposal, I think. And then we've got strong leadership, strong collaboration and partnership, sustainable, great list. So ultimately, what this comes down to is that the same thing that makes an effective organization makes an effective funding proposal. You're supported by the people you're serving, so you're empowering others to overcome challenges and help themselves. We'll talk more about this later, but it's not having a savior complex. You want to have an empowerment focus. You do good work, Sarah talked about this, and you have the record of results and thoughtful programs to show for it. And then you take ongoing responsibility for that work, continually evaluating it and taking accountability for making things better if they can be better. So that's it. Hopefully you're feeling more confident already. Years ago, I went to a grant proposal workshop in Sacramento by someone named Harvey Chess, who was an activist who taught workshops for grant seekers and proposal writers. Maybe some of you have heard of him before. He likes to talk about that relationship between excellent fund proposals and organizational excellence. And this is so key to remember. Funders want to give money to organizations that are going to use it most effectively. They are trying to maximize their return on investment or their ROI, and they want the money that they are spending and investing to have the most impact that it can. So that is what the whole review process is about. Where can our money have the most impact? They don't want to fund proposals or organizations that don't have these 4 criteria. So is there a secret formula? No, there's not a secret formula, but these things are really key to think about. And I have worked in the last 8 years in various strategy roles at Intuit. And one thing we love in strategy is a good framework. So while I don't have a secret formula for you, I do have a framework. And we're going to use this to shape our class around today. So a competitive grant proposal is the sum of effectiveness. That's your organization. How effective is it? What's it known for? Preparation, really thorough preparation for the proposal. All of that thorough research and planning, addressing all requirements, and then storytelling, good storytelling. So you have a compelling narrative that resonates with the reader. We have talked a little bit already about effectiveness and organization. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time today on the preparation piece of things. We will tee up the storytelling. We'll have a module on that at the end, but then that will also be a large part of the focus for the in-person workshops at the end of May and early June. All right, so thorough preparation is the combination of understanding what the RFP and the funding organization are asking for, and then creating a really strong plan for how you're going to deliver exactly those things. So how can we really effectively understand the assignment for the RFP that we're talking about, the We Prosper Together RFP? What things should we be looking at? Jasleen?
The RFP, just review it.
The RFP, yes. So if you have not printed it yet, print it, highlight it, write in the margins, and then read it again. And make sure you really, really spend time reading that so that you take away everything that's in there and how things are framed. That's a great one. What else can we do to understand the assignment? Lindsay, what do you think?
For this, we could watch the proposers webinar.
Yeah, for sure. The proposers webinar is a great resource. And it has a lot of great nuggets right within it. I think at about minute 20, Alan, who's the COO of Valley Vision, goes through every single every single part of the RFP. And so, sorry, we'll pause it. And so right there, you can break down each different section and have him discuss it and talk through it. So that's a great resource. What else?
Read the economic impact report that Valley Vision did. It has a lot of good detail to back up your argument for your program, because it shows where movements are, where they have gaps, and where they're looking to develop. It's long but super good. And then
That's this
the other
regional
thing,
plan, Sarah, or is it a different one?
it's the economic development report or economic study report. It's thick. I do have this all printed out, but it's back at my office. It's a big report that kind of shows how people travel between county and county and the different sectors they're looking to develop and why, and where there's room. So there's a whole bunch of information in there. And then the other one would be to meet with your ambassador from your local area, because they all have ideas on what they're specifically looking for in their region.
Yeah, that's great. Those are two awesome ones. I'll add to it this regional plan, and there's an executive summary of the regional plan. And so
that's it.
That's it.
Well,
okay.
it's the whole one. It's the economic. Is it like 300 pages?
This one is, it's huge.
Yeah, it's that one. It's the economic assessment.
Okay.
If you read that, it really, and then like I would get like sticky tabs, the little ones, like your little Post-its, and mark each section so that when you're writing, you can go directly to what they're looking for.
Awesome. That's great. Those are great tips. And that, as you can see, I'm not going to scroll through all 300 pages, but this is sort of just like a giant cheat sheet into the minds of the funders. And you're going to find a treasure trove of framing, of words, of data points, of things that you can borrow and use to build a proposal that's very, very well aligned. Okay, what else? What else can we look at? How about the Q&A document? Have you all spent time on that? Oops, not that one. It's here. So this is a great place to look and to check back really regularly. So actually yesterday in this course, we taught the same content, but a question came up clarifying about having pathways to existing jobs. And is that in? Is that out? What do we think? And so since then, that has actually been added to the Q&A, and everyone can go and double check and see the clarification. Yes, it can count. And so you want to check back on this every few days. If you have a question, you can submit as well. This is a great resource to come back to really regularly. What else? Can anyone think of something else that we can go to for our preparation? How about the website? Lots of information just on the website, resources. Some of the things that, like Sarah just mentioned, are linked to right here. And there's a handy little tab called Projects, where you can see the round 1 portfolio. And so if you're wondering, like, I want some examples, or I'm not quite sure like what this would look like, right here, you can scroll down and see all of the organizations and projects who received funding in round 1. And you can click into each one and get more information. So this is a great place to help zero in on those requirements, make sure you're thinking through your proposal and kind of checking it against these, and maybe getting some inspiration too. All right. So let's recap. We really are wanting to be detectives at this stage. The RFP is your primary source. Read it, highlight it, read it again. Follow the blue links that are in there to their other destinations. Notice what words they're using and how they talk. And I'd say it's also always a good idea to just go look at the form where you're gonna submit, because sometimes organizations will put their word count limits in there and not in the RFP. The RFP, this one does have the word count limits, but nothing is more awful than like preparing all your draft answers and then going into submittable or something and realizing that like you wrote 600 words for a 50-word count thing. And it's like, okay, oops. So do your due diligence, your surround sound research. We didn't touch on this, but some of you mentioned earlier that you got some feedback for round 1. If you did, that's great primary information too. Make sure that you're looking at that. You're really seeking to understand it. We touched on the proposers conference. And then we talked about some of the things that you can do to research your funder very thoroughly. So press releases, something we didn't look at, funded projects, we looked at some of those, exploring the website. And why are we doing all of this? We are wanting to make sure that we qualify. So if you don't, then even all the best prep and storytelling in the world isn't going to help you get funded. So we'll talk more about this in a minute. And then secondly, we want to write a proposal that really matches the funder's priorities. So you want to nail that. You want to like zero in on what do they most care about and how can I align to it? And doing all of that research will help you find those things to be focused on. And then lastly, and we've talked about this, but you're looking for things that you can borrow. So great data, good framing, what can make your application better? These are gold nuggets and they will save you time and help you have a stronger application. But I will say, be careful how you're using them. Make sure you're using them really authentically and genuinely, not just throwing like peppering buzzwords in. You want to still use them well, but it's a great place to kind of find those things and make sure that you are well aligned. So let's talk a little more about qualification, because this was something that if you went to the proposers conference, you heard Renee talk about some of the pitfalls from round one, where people submitting projects that were not qualified. And so there, this is the key to everything. And let's be really specific with the RFP. If you've got it in front of you, what is the very first section after the table of contents in the RFP? Anyone have it? Ellen, do you have that?
The eligibility checklist.
Perfect. Yes. Eligibility checklist. And so what are the 4 things that are in that checklist? Can someone read those off? Ellen, do you mind reading those?
I unfortunately do not have it in front of me, but if someone would actually be able to share that, that'd be helpful.
The RFP?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chester. All right, so Nate, what is the very first, or what are the 4 things in that eligibility checklist?
Let me pull, I'm
I
trying
can
to find
share.
which page.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead, Patricia.
So it's, does the project serve one or more of the following counties? And it lists several of the counties. Is it a pre-development phase? It's also asking, is it a priority tradable industry sector or opportunity sector? And does it benefit disinvested communities in the capital region?
Great. So I'm going to say that since you all talked about the thing you loved in your county, that you probably qualify on the number 1, is it the right geography? But those other 3 are really important and you want to make sure that you're lined up with them. So what does it mean to be a pre-development project? Could anyone define that for us?
I can. Pre-development would either be an exploratory or a last mile project. So things like feasibility studies or planning or a pilot, if it's really carefully defined as opposed to an implementation project.
Yeah, that's great. So pre-development, it means it's before the development stage and like that implementation stage. Great. Thank you, Kayla. And this is honestly a really rare proposal or an opportunity, I'd say, because so many grants are trying to fund things that have done all the pre-development and now you're ready to implement. So it's a really cool opportunity, but it also can be tricky because it's like, well, wait, what stage are we in and what can we ask for? And so really spend time on those definitions to make sure that you understand where you're fitting there. All right, and then what about industries that the RFP is targeting to help grow? What are those industries? Sarah?
It is biotechnology, precision manufacturing, working lands, and business services.
Yep, those are the priority tradable. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, those are the ones that are the tradable sectors, meaning that they have the largest ability to expand and improve our economy long term. And then the other ones are construction, healthcare, tourism, and creative economy. When I went to the initial planning for these as well, they mentioned that there are supportive services as well. So like childcare for me, is that none of these things can occur without childcare. So specifically precision manufacturing or working lands, you're going to have longer times you need childcare, right? Off times and maybe on holidays. And so for that, you would require childcare that's also expanded.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And what is the definition of disinvested populations? What does that mean?
They haven't had equality investments made in those areas or in those populations.
Yeah, and this one actually, I believe, is a refresh definition since the first round. So on page 9, if you look at the top, disinvested communities are those experiencing income disparities, systematic racism, racial inequalities, climate change vulnerabilities, historical systematic oppression, geographic isolation, and exclusion from traditional systems of opportunity. So you want to make sure that your proposal is focused on people who would fit that definition. And I'm sorry, I had not moved back to my slides, so we caught up quickly, but we're back. I think you can all see qualification check. Is that right? Okay. All right, so let's just do some practice together, actually. And before we do that, David, you have a question?
Yeah, I want to talk about disinvested communities for just a minute. What's the best supporting documentation for proving a disinvested community? What are the data points that you need to prove that there is racial inequality, that there is climate change vulnerabilities and things like that?
Yeah, I think that one can be like a little bit dependent on what the community is. So is it a group of people that, your county is known, everybody knows that group is struggling or doesn't have as many opportunities? You probably have to spend less time clarifying. If it's a group that people might not automatically think of, then you would probably want to offer some more proof. And I would say in general, this is a great place to sort of marry data. So maybe things you can find in the fact book or on the website or in that big regional plan with some concrete details from your own community. So maybe you say, in our county, the unemployment rate is X, which is one of the lowest in the states. And in a recent meeting for job seekers, the need for better opportunities was very clear, as 57% of attendees said they can't even get an interview. I don't know, I'm making it up, but you're bringing together both data, kind of those proof points, and then some of the like real color where it's like, oh, that makes me see what you mean. Like that makes sense that, people from whatever group who are coming to that meeting aren't having that opportunity. Does that help?
That does help. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. And so the examples we're going to look at are AI generated. They are not anybody's real proposal. But let's take a look at this one and try to score it on those 3 criteria. So as we read, ask yourself, okay, is this pre-development? Are we at the right stage? Is this targeting the right kind of job creation and the economic equity? So would someone be willing to read this one out? Maybe Patricia.
Sure. YOLO Climate Smart Ag Innovation Hub. The YOLO Climate Smart Ag Innovation Hub is an exploratory pre-development project designed to assess the feasibility of establishing a regional center in West Sacramento focused on regenerative agriculture, climate-resilient food systems, and biotech-driven soil health solutions. This initiative aims to support job creation in the working lands and biotechnology sectors by building workforce pipelines for middle skill roles such as lab and field technicians, agricultural equipment, maintenance workers, and production specialists. Catalyst funding will support critical early stage activities, including a market analysis, environmental review of the proposed brownfield site, and the development of a community benefits agreement co-created with historically disinvested communities in Southport and Broderick. The project will also fund capacity building for local BIPOC-led agricultural cooperatives, ensuring community-led planning and equitable economic participation.
Thank you. Jarek, what do you think? Does this one qualify? All right. Maybe we don't have Jarek. Jill? Oh, Jarek is here. What do you think,
Yeah,
Jarek?
I'm here. I didn't expect you to call my name. Sorry about that. Reading through it, I didn't catch everything that was read. I'm going to be very honest with you. Let me skim through it. Give me a chance.
Jill, maybe you can help Jarek out. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. I'm behind. Thank you.
All right, we'll have Chelsea. Can you? Oh, Jill.
Hi there.
Jill's off
Hi.
mute. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm calling in from my phone today. So I would say that as far as my understanding of disinvested communities, I think that would fit, but I don't know if it meets all the other details.
Okay, so the other ones, just as a reminder, we're looking for pre-development, targeting, and then targeting job creation in addition to economic equity. Chelsea, what do you think?
I mean, it seems like it does to me.
Yeah, pre-development projects. So it's focused on things that happen before development. It's looking at the steps that would need to happen in early stage. It mentions market analysis, environmental review. All of these are things that happen beforehand. So that makes sense. How about the job creation? Does that look like a fit?
Yeah, I mean, it mentioned specifically job creation in the working lands and biotech, right?
Yeah. So here's a great example of one that matches up really well. This one, I think we'll skip over right now. But this is another one that I'd say hits pretty well. Maybe I'll just pull out a few key things. This is a last mile pre-development project. So the last mile projects are ones that are sort of that final stage of development, pre-development, where it's not yet ready to like break ground or do the thing at scale, but there's some last mile things that need to happen. And this one also has that focus on the right people and the right jobs, and then the climate and environmental focus. How about this one? If someone could read this one aloud. David Spar, would you mind reading this one?
Sure. Calusa Riverfront Pavilion Project proposes the construction of a new event venue and public amphitheater along the Sacramento River, designed to boost local tourism and generate revenue through weddings, festivals, and seasonal markets. The project team is requesting Catalyst funds to begin construction immediately, having already selected contractors and finalized architectural designs. Once completed, the pavilion is expected to draw visitors from surrounding counties and support local small businesses through vendor space, rentals, and promotional opportunities.
Thank you. Nate, what do you think? Is this one match?
I mean, I think so. Like, to me, it might be a little bit brief, but yeah.
What does anyone else have a different perspective?
Well, it says it's already ready to go, so it's not even like the end of the road pre-planning stage if they have finalized architectural designs. And I'm not quite sure how this does the environmental impact. As far as creating jobs, it might create jobs for those that work there, but it's not within one of the tradable sectors that I can see. So I think it falls short in a lot of areas, although I'd like to see it. That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, because there's a lot of projects that sound great, and then you like dig in and it's like, ooh, but this is not aligned with the thing that the funder is focused on. So Sarah mentioned it, but that line that says to begin construction immediately is a kind of red flag, where it's like, okay, if they're ready to begin construction, this is no longer a pre-development project. And then, as you mentioned also, we don't have a clear connection here to some of those specific sectors that we're trying to boost job creation and preparation for. So that one is also, yep. And then good point, Patricia. We also don't see a clear connection to how it will impact disinvested communities. Now, it's possible that you could add some details to this, and maybe it does have a great impact for disinvested communities somehow, and there's some sort of job creation that does make sense. But even if you could nail those two, if it's ready to begin construction, you are not in the right phase to be asking for funding. Does anyone have questions on that?
Yeah, I do. With tourism is, I realize that it doesn't qualify because it's ready to begin. But with tourism as an opportunity sector, let's say it was the feasibility study for a riverfront pavilion. Doesn't create a whole lot of jobs, but does create tourism. Would it qualify? Maybe it just wouldn't score as high in that particular portion, but would it qualify as a tourism project?
That's a good question. So I will give you what I would say based on my reading of the RFP. So again, I am not affiliated. I did not write the RFP, but I would say that you would still need to make it very explicit how the tourism is connecting to the jobs and like growing the job opportunities. So just bolstering tourism in itself, while that sounds cool, that's not necessarily having a direct impact on either the job readiness or the job creation. So if you don't make that link, I think you might be falling short. And if you do, then that sounds like a potential fit. Would be my read of it. And you raise, I think that question raises a good point too, of like, there's a lot of places where there can sort of be like gray area where you're like, okay, this feels like maybe I'm there. Be explicit. Make sure you can connect the dots very clearly, and then connect the dots in your grant proposal so that the reader has that very clear connection for them and they're not stuck in the gray area of like, I don't, what? Is this clear? Is it not? And from this reading, it's not clear on all the fronts, but it's definitely, it could be possible in a different world that isn't ready for construction with some more details that it could fit. But I would want to see that really explicitly mapped out. And if I just saw boosting local tourism and generating revenue, I'm not seeing the connection to the jobs very clearly at all. All right, let's do another one. Let's try this one. So Kayla, do you mind reading this one?
The Placer Outdoor Economy Enhancement Initiative is a pre-development effort aimed at supporting local tourism and small business growth across the Sierra foothills. The project focuses on planning and preparing for a network of scenic byways, bike-friendly routes, and visitor signage that will connect outdoor recreation areas with small business hubs in Auburn, Colfax, and nearby communities. Proposed activities include designing wayfinding elements, coordinating with local partners to identify signage locations, and developing a marketing strategy to promote Placer County as a year-round outdoor destination. The initiative includes the purchase and installation of branded signs and kiosks as a way to quickly activate tourism corridors and boost exposure for local shops, cafes, and lodging providers, especially during the slower travel seasons.
All right, does anyone want to take a stab at this one? We've got the tourism theme continued.
I would say no, because I didn't see much about job creation. It seems like it's just trying to market for like jobs that are already there and just kind of bring more business in. And second, there's nothing about disinvested communities.
Yeah, what about the pre-development?
I feel like it's somewhat there, but because it talks about planning and preparing for a network, but it still kind of feels like it's falling short a bit, but it doesn't seem like they're immediately developing something. So that one's a little like iffy for me.
Yeah, does anyone else have thoughts on the pre-development piece? This one's kind of a sneaky one.
Yeah, they say it's pre-development, but they're planning to purchase and install branded signs and kiosks, which is an implementation activity.
Yeah, so good point out, Kayla. The activities that are ready to go, so they're purchasing, they're installing, is a very quick signal that we are not in pre-development land. But they use that word, and so it can be like a throw off, and you're like, wait, but is it? And so this is another reminder of make sure you use the words that the funder likes, but use them correctly, because they will be able to see if you are not. And then that will chip away a little bit at your own credibility, in addition to helping you not get the grant. All right, there's one more that I was going to show you. This one's actually live from the round one. It's from the the website that we were looking at, the Greater Sacramento TPM Manufacturing Collaborative. We could go through this one, or I'd love to just take questions and hear if anyone has questions on these criteria or the scoring, if you're wondering about just like the qualification piece. Everybody
I
feeling
guess
good? Go
I
ahead,
have a
Justin.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, about like a pilot. You would think that a pilot's like it's almost ready to go, but you're still trying to figure out some of like the kinks around the project. So what makes that more pre-development versus implementation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So based on my reading of the RFP, the key is that the pilot is not at scale. And so it's really trying to prove out a concept that then could be expanded. If you were ready for the expansion, then you're not in the pre-development anymore, you're in like implementation. But a pilot is still testing things out. You're going to make different decisions depending on the results. And so that's why it's pre-development, because it's not having the big full impact. It's having earlier like learning impact for the project to be successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
So what was your question about this proposal, Sarah?
So
Sorry.
we can talk through this one just like we just did, but I wanted to pause as well and just see like, are there any questions that have come up for anyone as we've gone through the scoring and tried to practice this? So, you know, on any of those criteria or on just like, you know, more on pre-development or disinvested communities, are any questions that have come up? Okay, I would
I
say
have a question. Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead,
sorry, I have a
George. Yeah.
question. You know, one of the projects that was funded was like the Cal Epic, where they have a, you know, a van that's going to be mobile and has a whole plan to do workforce development. So is that a pilot project, even though they're already implementing or plan to implement?
So which one is that?
I think it's the Cal Epic. Yeah, Epic on the Road.
Epic on the Road. So I only have the information that's here, so let's look at it together. Epic on the Road expands workforce development training to the greater Sacramento area's 8-county region for manufacturing careers with new energy and transportation technologies. They're deploying an all-electric mobile classroom and partnering with companies to have trainings for skills that can be utilized for precision manufacturing career opportunities. And they're going to work with various regional partner organizations to ensure opportunities are provided to underserved communities where participants receive available wraparound services to help remove barriers to long-term manufacturing jobs. Okay, so and your question is, it feels like this is not as much pre-development, it's like ready to go. Is that your question?
That's my vibe, yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
I do not know the details of this project. I have not read their proposal. My guess is that this is the vision of what their pre-development project is moving towards, and the wording on the website is just not making it clear on what those pre-development activities are. So maybe they are doing the, you know, curriculum development. Maybe they are doing the work with Rivian and Bosch to have the plans. But I don't know. I don't speak to those details. I totally agree with you that based on this, it doesn't feel clear. But my guess and assumption would be that they are doing the pre-development activities for that project.
okay, yeah. Yeah, the other thing is I think they're already doing some of those things just because I'm a little bit familiar with what they're doing.
You know it.
Yeah, but maybe, yeah, like you said, there's something in the proposal that I'm missing.
Well, and you know, if you are familiar with them, I would say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but like maybe reach out to them and ask them to share a little bit more about how they're using the funds and what they did in their proposal. And maybe there's something there that you could actually borrow or learn from.
Thank you.
All
Sarah,
right.
Sarah,
Yeah.
can you hear me? I have a question. This is Jarek. With respect, I'm paying attention now. So, with respect to the aspect of serving disinvested communities, I heard someone else ask about how that could be proved out in, or at least modeled in the request or in the proposal. But I'm also wondering, seeing that if you look at the root of the problem, it's about lack of opportunity being offered with no respect paid to certain attributes that people have, or perceive not to have. Would it just be enough to say that the project is going to create a level playing field and platform and just be designed as such? And Would you need any other proof beyond that statement? Or do you need to be able to say, identify a proposed community and sort of point your finger at them? I guess what I'm asking is it enough just to make a commitment to hiring everyone and trying to
Yeah.
raise the participation of everyone in the community with no respect paid to extraneous attributes or perception of attributes?
Yeah, good question. I would say on that because disinvested communities are all over this proposal and all of that research that we did a few minutes ago, you do want to make the connection explicit and clear. I think what you said though is 60% of the way there. And the way that you could handle that is you could lay out the opportunities you're creating and talk about how by creating these level playing field opportunities, you're increasing opportunities for X, Y, and Z group in your county who, details, haven't had as many opportunities or haven't had as much exposure. You just do make the connection a
Yeah.
little more clear. You're also increasing perhaps the opportunities for others, but I'd say that you do want to think about how you're connecting to that. And then the real bonus point A+ answer is do the work to make sure you're really thinking about them up front. So if you can say, hey, we're going to create 25 jobs in this sector, and we want to make sure that like people who maybe aren't as familiar with these are really getting the chance to apply. So we're going to have some explicit reach outs, partnering with these companies in our county to offer trainings to these specific groups who are underserved, so they really have a shot at these opportunities. I'm
Good
making it
point.
all up.
No, good point.
But-
I got it.
But
Yeah.
bring it all together and make
Good
sure
story.
you do draw those connections and say it explicitly. I would say, the short
Got it.
answer is I don't think what you said is enough.
No, I hear you, but you also did enough to create some imagery there. My second question, at least in my mind, my second question is: does it lend to the credibility of the outreach and the claim of service to disinvested communities for the person who's writing the proposal to actually be from it, if not, or have some connection to it, and have sort of been down that road, right? I guess that's part of the story too, right?
Yeah,
Sarah?
that sounds like incredible storytelling, and it
Okay.
certainly would add to the credibility, and you would want to convey that in your write-up so that you can say so-and-so on the team came from this background. They will be building on their experience and working with these others, and that's a great story. So for sure.
All right. So because before previous and all other, I'm sort of a bit of observation mixed in a question. Some of the previous answers to questions along these lines really look towards just the physical, just looking at the identity of the group or people and just saying, okay, they must be disinvested, right? With no direct proof of that particular person from that neighborhood is particularly disinvested, right? So if we can use just general characterizations, then that means, if I guess by extension, then if the proposal writer is him or herself from that community, then it should lend natural credibility to the claim that
Yeah, I
we
would hope
care.
so. That would need to then come through loud and clear in the proposal and be part of that storytelling package. But remember, we talked about funders want to fund opportunities that will have the biggest return on investment for their dollars. So
Yeah.
if they see a project that has thoughtfully been put together by someone who's very close to the people they're trying to serve, I would imagine that would carry great weight because they would then have more trust potentially for that organization. But you
I
need to
got it.
then bring that together in your storytelling. But I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's the storytelling part that I got it. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, so then let's move from the research that we've done, laying the groundwork for being ready to write our answers, to our plan so that we really have that strategy and timeline for success. So what do you all think is important to having an effective plan? What are you going to do to set yourself up for success? Jody?
Sarah, what I'm going to do is look for meeting the requirements and the return on investment, but aligning disadvantage in the data points and what the success ratio could be in our proposed feasibility study. And the preparation is going to be going back through those documents you mentioned, the demographics, and going back and looking at who we interviewed in the community and aligning those items up to best fit and answer the questions in the RFP.
That's great, Dave. I think then to kind of connect it one step further, that exercise you just described is going to take time, and you're going to want to budget for that time. And so one of the things that you need to do right now as you look at now to June 15th is say, okay, how do I give ourselves the time we need for that deep dive exercise, making sure we're pulling out those bullet points, making sure that we have time to then document them, get input, get feedback. And so just writing out your timeline, start with June 15, work backwards, but give yourself time for that great sounding exercise as well as other activities that you're going to want to do. What else is part of the thorough preparation and planning ahead?
Maybe start engaging. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead,
Same
George.
thing, probably say it's the same thing, identifying partners and getting them engaged.
Yeah. You were going to say the same thing? Perfect. Good minds think alike. So that also takes time, what you both just described. And so as you think about figuring out who it is, engaging them, having time for back and forth, like we don't have that much time when you think of the timeline now to the end. And so you're going to want to build what are the days exactly where you're hoping to kind of have those discussions. When are you going to meet up? When are you going to have a phone call? When are they going to read your draft? When are, how are you going to build and incorporate their input into that planning timeline? How about on the scoring as you think about writing? Let's see, here's the RFP. Something that several people have asked about, I believe in the registration, was just like, okay, what about scoring? How is this going to be scored? How do I set myself up well for the scoring? So let's imagine that you just want to prepare by having a really clear rubric. And I'm going to do this with you live for a minute and show you what I would do. So I've got a blank document, I've got the RFP, and I'm going to build myself a rubric. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste. Obviously, I need to do a little bit of reformatting in order to, oops. And on this one, I did do some pre-work so that we could hopefully not do all the reformatting live. But identifying information, there's no point values for this. You just have to have it, but I'm going to make sure that I do have it. The next one is org qualifications. We won't do that one live, but let's do project description. So again, I would just go right over to the RFP. I'm going to grab this one, 40 points. So I'm going to note that down. Oops. Going to paste this. I need to do some reformatting. Going to give myself a minute to do that. And if you take 40 and divide it by 5, how many points do you think each of these subcategories is worth? Anyone?
8.
8. So I'm going to assume that I'm going to get 8 points for every one of these. And if you look at the one right before, organizational qualifications 24, there's 4 sections. So I'm going to assign 6 points to each of these. And I'm starting to have something that I'm going to be able to say Am I doing this? And even score myself when I go back through this. All right, let's do one more part of it. Budget, we'll skip down because this was another place that there were some questions in the pre-registration. So proposed budget. There's, oops, we'll do this. There's 3 criteria here that we want to answer. And there's 16 points, which doesn't divide well by 3. So I'm going to make a judgment call and assume that this last one is just required. It's kind of a gimme, but there's not much meat to it. You just have to have it. So I'm going to assume that we've got another 8 points for this one and 8 points for this one. Now, we grabbed everything that was in the RFP right here, but there's a few other things that came up about budgets in other locations. Can anyone think of what those are and where they were?
Don't they show up at the end?
What was that?
At the end of the process for the contract writing portion, if you're chosen. I think it comes up there. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, and do you remember what came up? Like, what else should we know about budgets?
No, I don't remember exactly what came
Okay.
up. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Does anyone remember anything else that might need to appear on our rubric? What percentage of funds can be used for indirect costs? Anyone know?
I believe it was 10%.
Do you remember where you saw that, George?
During the last info session.
The proposers conference? Okay, so we could go through the proposers conference. We could also actually find the answer to that one over here on the Q&A. If I can find wherever it is, it's here.
I think you may have passed it. It may have been at the beginning.
at
There
the
was like
very
a
top.
10% somewhere. In the first, like at the very top. Oh, somewhere like in the middle.
All
If you
right,
scroll
here
down
we
a little
go.
bit, there it
Yeah,
is.
right here. So indirect costs cannot exceed 10% inclusive of administrative costs. Can someone remind us what is an indirect cost?
Indirect are like the costs of your organization that come in. So like insurance, rent for the facility, IT, all that sort of stuff,
Yeah,
benefits,
exactly.
taxes.
It's basically all these things that aren't part of the project directly. So you can have up to 10% of your budget for those sort of run the business things, but you don't want to have more than 10%. Anything else that anyone noticed about the budget anywhere? What's the funding range? When can you spend money until?
Wasn't it September through September?
So I think it was August 1 estimated start till September 30th of 2026. And that was in the RFP higher up in the literature, but that's so important to remember because you don't want to write a 3-year budget. You don't want to write an 18-month budget. Make sure that your budget is in this time frame so that you are meeting the criteria of that. And then how about the amount of money that you can ask for? Is there any guidance given about that?
Wasn't it up to $1 million? I don't know. I haven't.
Yeah, no, that's great, Sarah.
looked
So
at
it
recently.
says there's no like hard and fast, absolutely has to be within this range, but the guidance was generally ask for up to $1 million. And that is in the RFP. So you notice that as I wrote this out, I noted where I got that. That's because a month from now, Sarah probably won't remember what today Sarah did. And so I want to make sure I'm not like hunting through everything later. I want to keep track of that. But this is helping me supplement just that direct copy and paste with some really key things that I want to make sure that I'm double checking before I submit. So I've got a finished rubric here of what I would have for myself if I was working on this. I've got each section. I'm remembering things like on the sector alignment, I can get 16 points or 8 points, depending if I'm drawing the connection to which kinds of jobs. I've got my budget narrative, I've got my extra things, and this is gonna give me something now that I can use to double check, to make sure that I'm checking things off, to score myself. Like I would say, even beyond just checking off, like score yourself. Ask your colleague down the hall who's going to read a draft to take this rubric and score each question. Are you getting 8 points? Are you getting 3 points? Are they totally not sure? And if they're not sure, then you got some work to do to figure out how do you make this obvious that it's 8 points. This is such a great tool for you, and then to use with the partner organization you're working with the board member you're asking to read it, whoever it is who might be reviewing with you, this is going to be a great tool for you to have to use with them. I am not going to add this link to the chat, so you feel free to take screenshots, but I do think it's important for each of you to do this yourself. And also I don't want to give you any information that is not, all of the things, because there might be some other little places that you want to do like what I did with the budget and kind of find some of those bonus point things and make sure that you've got those really clear. But hopefully this gives you an illustrative how-to, and you can see that it really is a lot of just copy and pasting and then doing some deduction. Like, I don't know for sure if these are all the point values, but it's kind of easy to do the division and figure out what it probably is if you were one of the readers. All right, let's see. So we did the RFP rubric. What else would be important to planning effectively? I think we actually covered, the budget. So let's talk about budget as an example, because this was one that came up in some of the registration questions too. So let's just imagine that you are not super familiar with budget templates, or you're like unsure of what they're asking for. This is your chance in your plan ahead moment to figure out your game plan for that. So you do want to be specific, you want to be itemized, you want to give details, but if you're not sure, like figure out what resources you have. You can go into Google and pull up a spreadsheet and ask AI to build you a sample 1-year budget for a project that includes justification and lets you have itemized breakdowns with categories such as personnel and, whatever it is. You can Google it. Call someone you know. Maybe one of your board members has a strong background in business and they're really good with budgets. Well, talk to them, ask them for a sample budget they've used in the past. This is a place where you should feel empowered, and then build it into your timeline. So you're nervous about it, give yourself some extra time and make sure that you have a deadline for your budget draft so you can get good feedback. But let's just imagine that we're not sure about budgets and we're going to go ahead and Google it together. We're going to say, let's say project budget. Oops. Project budget grant proposal. And I'm going to click on images. And I have a whole bunch of images here. They're not necessarily all great. Some are probably better than others, but it's giving me the signals that I should probably have a table in my budget. And some of these look like they could be helpful foundations. So I'm just going to pick this one, visit the website. And I get some bonus, some tips and tricks for creating an awesome budget. So these actually look like they could be quite useful. Maybe I'll use them. And there's a template. Let's take a look. So this doesn't look perfect. It has 4 years. We are obviously working in a 1-year range, but I could do quarters with this. Some justification, some explanation. It's broken down. I could take this as is and then tailor it to be something that I work on. So that's a resource that I could use. Another trick that I always recommend doing is Google the organization that you are applying to and just see, is there any like templates that they've shared with other proposals? So let's Google it. There's this first result sheet 1. What is it? Let's go ahead and pull that up. And I'm going to need to go over here and share that screen. This is what I just pulled up. So interesting. This is We Prosper Together. This is not shared with the RFP because there was no template with the RFP, but it looks like something that Valley Vision is using for some other part of We Prosper Together. And it looks like a great thing that I could build on. So I'd probably delete this column. I don't really need that over after position title, but I've got justification. I've got details of the cost. Those were things that were asked for directly in the RFP. And if I wasn't sure what format to use, I would probably build on this one. So that is a tip for you as well. Like, go around and see what you can find that might give you, let's see if I can get back over to where we were. That might give you, what do you all see right now? Valley Vision budget example or no? Are we back on the web?
Budget example.
Excel.
Okay, so now we're back to the slides over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just gave you a totally fictional example right here of 2 parts of a budget to give you a sense of what I think of as a good budget needing to include. This is made up, it's from me. I did not validate this. But this to me makes sense that you would have your subtotals, you will have your details, you will go into very specific details. So for example, if the finance lead is spending 4 hours a week, you will calculate the budget on 4 hours a week. You'll explain what they're doing, why they're important to the project, how you calculated those costs. And you would, these are just 2 categories. So obviously the full budget would be bigger, but this is the level of granularity that you would have for your budget. Maybe you're still a little unsure. You're like, well, what about the budget narrative? Like, I'm not sure about that. That feels, that makes me nervous. Well, let's just go ahead and again, Google it, budget narrative example. There's 2 examples that pop right up. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not, but I'm going to click in. Here's a sample budget narrative. This looks like a very helpful thing to look at. Maybe I will borrow parts of it.
Hey, Sarah, your screen's still showing the sheets.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Sorry, you didn't see any of that. Let's go. All of my brilliance missed. Okay, I think this will work now. Do you see this sample budget?
Yes.
Okay, and here's what I did. I just Googled, oh, and so you didn't even see this. This was my budget example of personnel and operating costs. So this is the level of like granularity that I would say is probably wise to get to, where you can really explain the details. And on budgets, things are going to change. That is normal. And if you went to the proposers conference, you heard Alan talk about at some point, we'll probably have budget modifications that you'll need to do. And so my sense is that Valley Vision would work with you if you estimate that something is going to cost $10,000 and then 3 months into the project, you realize, hey, to do a really good job of that, that's going to be a different amount. And we're changing this other thing because we've learned new information. I would think that you'd be able to go back to them and have that conversation. But upfront, you want to be very thoughtful and thorough and imagine that this was the best plan you could have to put out there. So if you are asking for money for a subcontractor, and I would say do the extra work right now to kind of figure out like, who could that be? Is there someone who already has credibility in our community or who we've worked with in the past? Can we talk to them and get like a rough estimate of what that cost would be? And if you take those steps and put that information in here, all of a sudden you have a project that kind of comes to life. The reader is going to see like, oh, this feels real. This feels like an organization that is doing the work, that is doing the planning, that is really understanding what we're looking for in terms of like, thoughtful, smart, ready to go with your project. And so even if some of those details might change, I would not be paralyzed by the uncertainty of like, oh, well, but what if we discover later? Give it your best shot and research it really thoroughly and then back it up really, really well, document your thinking. And then as you go along, you'll have the chance later probably to adjust as need be, but you want to do the upfront work now. And that'll make your job also easier later because you'll have done all this great thinking that will help you hit the ground running. And I would say that often readers can really sniff out when people are just padding budgets. If someone estimates something is $50,000 and they at their organization just did that same thing for $12,000, they're going to be like, that just doesn't feel respectful. That doesn't make sense. And so if you can explain that your $50,000 thing is because it's this really incredible organization who's going to do this really intensive stuff, and this is why it's so involved, and here's the reasons and documentation, then they might be like, oh, that makes sense. They've done their homework. But what you're trying to do in the whole proposal, but especially in the budget, is really show them you've done your homework. You are a credible, strong organization that is going to do good things with their money and be extremely responsible and conscientious. So be detailed, be granular, put the detail in. All right. So back to the example that you didn't see, I just typed budget narrative example into Google again. I'm trying to be comfortable with budget narratives. I'm not quite sure what's wanted. The first result seems interesting. Let's check it out. I'm sure this isn't perfect, but this is something I could start from if I wasn't sure what a budget narrative looks like. And I'd say the second one, budget narrative sample, let's check this one out too. These are for other, completely separate different things, but it's breaking down what is a budget narrative. I'm seeing a budget narrative format. It's showing me that there's calculations. It's justifying why the expense should be there. And all of a sudden, something that maybe felt really confusing or uncertain is something that I can build on and customize to make my own. And it doesn't have to be such a scary thing anymore. Like, what is the budget narrative? What are they asking for? Any questions on that?
So how is the justification area on this budget different than the narrative? It's just more detail.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's more detail. My personal feeling is I as a writer would want the reader to be able to understand things at the moment that they're digesting it. So when they're looking at the budget, if there's an expense that's going to be like, well, what does that mean? That's a red flag or that's confusing. I would want to give enough color on the budget itself that I can fully absorb it and feel comfortable with it, that I understand it. The narrative would then go into more of the details, like maybe in the budget itself, it just says, this will be contractor X who we've worked in the past. They do strong quality work. And the narrative breaks down the 5 activities that they will be responsible for. And then I go to the narrative and it says contractors, Sarah will be doing these things and these will be the deliverables. So they're kind of like they're complementing each other and building on the same foundation. The budget is that visual view in particular, and the narrative is then breaking it down.
Hey, Sarah, what can you do about budget surprises? Like, let's say you were doing a feasibility study for a project, followed by a pilot project at the end of 9 months, say, for a feasibility study. And you discover during the feasibility process that this pilot project is going to take a little bit more money than you thought, or you need to hire an outreach coordinator that you didn't account for in that budget that you made 9 months ago. Is there any wiggle room at all for contingencies?
Yeah, so great question. I do not have the exact answer from Valley Vision. You could certainly ask them, write them and ask them. My feeling, if I were writing the grant proposal and in that situation, as I kind of think ahead and anticipate some of that, is that I would just want to document that thinking really well and explain what's going into that. So maybe I would say, our vision is that we're going to have these activities happening, culminating in this pilot program. As we look at the cost of that pilot program, we're assuming X, Y, Z, and A, but we imagine that we're also going to find out some new things as we go. And so we're going to either use the funding, we're going to either use this 10,000 for A, B, or C, depending what the results are of this information that we're gathering. I'm making it up again, but I'm getting into the level of detail where you can follow my thinking. I've thought it through. I'm anticipating what I can anticipate. And then I would say once you get to that point in the actual project, if you were funded, have the conversation with the funding organization and make sure that you're explaining what you've learned and what you recommend and what the options are. Sometimes it's no problem to add a little funding. Sometimes that funding is used up. And then you might have to get creative and say, okay, well, then we'll pull back on this other thing we were going to do because this is really the place that's most important for the funds. And it really is that conversation. But both in the pre-application phase and in that phase, what I as the funder would be looking for is a really thoughtful organization that is using and maximizing the money to have the biggest impact that you can. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Just to add to that question, so is that something where the budget narrative would be really helpful? So basically, maybe in the budget we allocate, I don't know, 10 grand to this specific bit, but in the narrative we say this could be reallocated depending on things we find out in this phase of the project or something.
Yeah, I think that's a smart idea. That makes sense to me. I think you just want to make sure you're accounting for all the dollars and showing the thought that goes into it, and not just like padding things or trying to add extra numbers. But it's like, oh, if I as the reader can follow your train of thought and see that you've put the thought in and that you have options or pivots even that you're building in. I mean, you could say, based on our experience for the last 10 years, we generally find that there's some unexpected things that happen around this stage in a project. And we imagine that that feasibility study that we did is really going to shape this, as well as our partnership with XYZ organization and doing Z. And so based on that, we're thinking we will either invest the money in another study to build on those learnings, or we're going to take that and put it into these focus groups, which will let us get into more granular details so that the final implementation is based on the right stuff, you know. So put that level of information in, show the thought process, and don't just have like pockets of money called, you know, flexible spending that have no explanation, because that I think might be a red flag. All right, any other budget questions or just kind of doing the research to build your plan? We briefly talked about this, but I think I gave the example of, say you had like a board member who, let me see actually what this. So let's imagine you have some other organization who was funded for something. We talked about the idea of someone reaching out to one of the phase 1 recipients, or maybe there's just something else that you admire, an organization working in something different in the region, or maybe they're in a different state or Southern California or somewhere else. And you think, well, they have like a stellar grant proposal writer, or their team is so strong. What if you were to reach out to them and ask them, hey, could I see some examples of a great proposal that you have written? I'm really trying to learn about budgets in particular and budget narratives. Is there anything that you could share with me? And as you can see in this like sample email, you want to certainly keep their information confidential. You want to use that purely for educational purposes. But there might be some networking that could really help you fill in some of your holes as well, by having other people either offer some resource that you want to kind of orient yourself with, or read your proposal. So you would maybe build time in, you reach out to so-and-so and say, hey, you know, haven't seen you in a while since that conference, but we had a great conversation there. I'm actually working for a proposal that's really aligned with what we were talking about. It'd be so helpful to have a second pair of eyes. We are targeting to have a really strong draft done by May 25th. Could I send it to you, and would you mind reading it and giving us your feedback? I'll send you my scoring rubric that I created. So this is exactly that example. So if you had a board member say, and you want to ask them to read, you want to contact them in advance. So please don't send it to them and say, hey, can you please turn this around by tomorrow morning? Give people the chance to plan ahead, give them a heads up. This is coming. Here's the information. Be super courteous, be super professional, be authentic. So do that research to personalize your outreach. If you are sending like cookie cutter emails to like 20 people, you know, it's just not, it's not a great look. It's not going to get you the help that you're hoping for. And then likewise, be reciprocal. And so is there anything that you could offer? Maybe in this room, you make some connections today and you decide to read each other's proposals and give feedback, or you realize like, hey, this person's really strong in budgets. They're going to give feedback to me, but I am really great at figuring out how partnerships. And I have these contacts at 3 organizations that would be incredible partners for them. And so I'm going to help introduce them to these partners that they can then work with. Like, what are the ways that you can offer something or give something in return? All right, so I think we covered all of these. You had great, you brought many of these in early, but as you plan ahead to win, you want to have that scoring rubric, figure out where your holes are, where your weaknesses are. If you know that you are particularly bad with grammar or typos, well, you better build some time to refine and proofread and get a proofreader on your list who's good at that. You want to have that clear timeline, give yourself polishing time, figure out who your contributing team is. And we're going to do an exercise in a few minutes where you actually write down some of those people and maybe start working on the contacts to them. But think about who can be in each different stage. Maybe someone needs to give you data. Maybe someone's going to do proofreading. Maybe someone's going to do a final review. Think about your partnerships. My feeling when I read about projects is the more strong partnerships I see, the more confidence I have in that project. That's just me as I'm like reading things and feeling like, is this a solid thing? But when I see that multiple organizations are coming together on a shared vision for something and working on different parts of it, it gives me confidence that there's been work done, there's been thinking, that this is something that's grounded in the community. And so, there's no requirement on certain number or anything, but I would say that that is a great way to bolster your application also. And then you can think about partnerships in both traditional and non-traditional ways. So maybe a partner is full on doing the project with you. Maybe the partner is just a really good partner on the reading and preparation, and they're going to be someone who helps you think through the disinvested communities component and make sure that you have the right criteria in mind for actually serving that group, because that's what they do day in and day out, and you can work together on that. But think about that really carefully and build in time to your timeline for that work. And one last one, which we haven't talked much about, but you need to think about your credibility and whether there is anything that you need to explain or overcome. So what do I mean by that? And I have the note that grammar matters, but I mean, what if you were funded by Valley Vision for something, 2 years ago, and they had to chase you every month for your reporting? You never turned things in on time and they were constantly having to reach out. That's in their mind, and that is not great for you. So you need to explain how you have changed your ways and offer them some reason to have confidence in you as a credible organization who is going to do your reporting this time. Or maybe you're a new organization and you just don't have the same years of experience to talk about that some of the other organizations have. And if you went to the proposers conference, you would have heard Alan, who talked about, well, maybe a creative way is that you can talk about the credibility of your leadership team. So maybe you need to say, hey, our CEO, while we have only been an organization for 1 year, our CEO comes from 20 years of experience. Here's her track record. Here's what she's done. Our CFO comes from this other place. Here's his credibility. And you put that together in your application. Maybe that's some of the places that you do, like the supplementary things that they offer. That could be a great place for you to kind of round out your edges if you have some things to explain. But, organizations tend to have reputations. If yours is not great for whatever reason, think about how you're going to overcome that and how you can make sure that you're addressing that in your application, because that is going to hurt you if you haven't found a way around it. All right, we are going to take a combined break and exercise, and we're going to go until 2:45. So this is a chance for you to step away for a minute, grab a cup of tea, but also try to get back quickly and actually write down some of your takeaways from the first part of this class. So you could just write down key things that you're going to make sure you do, start your to-do list, or 3 ideas are you could start your rubric, you could work on your timeline, or you could focus on identifying that team of who is going to contribute and be your readers, and how are you going to think about connecting with them ASAP to kind of paint the vision of the timeline for them. So we will go ahead, step away, back at 2:45, take your break, and then work on one of these components, and we will get back together then. We're gonna reflect a little bit on that exercise and just the class so far and key things you're taking away. And there's also an opportunity now for questions if there's something that came up for you as you were working on the exercise. But as you were working on thinking through your planning, would love to hear where you focused and anything you took away. Kayla, do you mind starting? Hold on, you're faint.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think something that I've been thinking about in relation to this presentation is that the importance of mapping the timeline, because I found myself in situations where like we had a lot of time to plan, but we didn't always use it well. And then we get to the end and we don't have what we need. And I think looking at some of those pieces that really take more time for the collaboration or getting input on drafts and then redrafting, it just is really apparent that that mapping the timeline piece is critical for having a successful application.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And I think that the places that you feel the most nervous about as you look at the RFP are especially the ones that need that extra time. So let that feeling of like, oh, help you focus on giving yourself some extra buffer for those spots. Chelsea, how about you?
I think that something that I've experienced along those lines is you just have to be really explicit with what you're asking your collaborators to help you with and how long it's going to take, and making sure that they know that if they want to be an active participant in your project and in your grant application, that like this is specifically exactly what you're hoping they can help you with, just so that they don't say, well, I didn't realize it was going to be XYZ or whatever, and just really make it very straightforward with them. Because I struggle with the things that I don't have like full control over when I'm preparing these grant applications.
Yeah, totally. And that's a really, really good tip for everyone, is to just be super clear on what you're asking for and when you're asking for it, so that there's not gray area to have a panicky last minute, like, oh, I didn't realize you needed that now. So that's great. Nate, how about you? What were you focused on during the exercise?
Yeah, I mean, I think I also thought about timeline and just some of the project work that I've been doing. I don't know, like there's a lot of things that can get shifted around. Like, so something that crossed my mind was like, how do I kind of measure or think about impact versus like deadline, and which one can sometimes be more important depending on I guess what the goals or initiatives of a project is. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, good to do that upfront thinking now so that you don't run out of the time. So that's great. Miguel, how about you? All right, Ellen, are you back? David Little.
Well, first I want to say thanks for holding this. I'm already more comfortable with the second go round than the first one, just after 2 hours of talking to you. I wish you'd been there the first time. But I have a real firmer picture about where we need to go. And the big thing I was thinking of during the planning part of it was just kind of spreading the load a lot better than we did in the first go around. Asking one person to write and organize a grant application and just having somebody else proof it isn't enough. I think we need to spread the workload out among our partners who are available to do so, and just make sure that there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen and not just one. I think that will help quite a bit. And then just the organization. You know, I was thinking of, I have a huge project in May, and like doing that huge project and then coming to this on June 2nd or so and polishing it off in a couple of days, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I realize that. And so just starting the work now is going to help tremendously.
That's great. Yeah, I'm so glad you're getting that head start now. And I did want to add one tip, because you're totally right on the bringing all those cooks in the kitchen, but make sure you still have one pin holder. One ultimate pin holder is my recommendation, is terms of gathering all the input, deciding what feedback to take and what not to take, and making sure you have a consistent tone and all those things are covered. Don't let this become, because you're bringing in so many different committee members, that it's sort of like you hope someone else remembered to check that that thing was in there. So do make sure that you really designate like who is going to own this end to end to work with all those collaborators, because that will help you to have a story that really holds together at the end. Let's see, Jarek.
For me, it's as it always is organizing and capturing everything that's needed to be able to construct the project. Okay, so in terms of writing the rubric and what you went through, Sarah, in writing out all of those key objectives, that's something that I do. But the hardest part is knowing where to find all the small pieces of information that are relevant, and knowing whether or not you have a complete set before you begin your process, right? You start, so, kind of setting up the pins and knocking them down from a bowling perspective, right? But, sometimes it's difficult to know if how many pins, do I have 10 pins or not, right? Or maybe, are we working with 10 pins, or maybe this is a weird set, right? So gathering all of that, getting it into one place, and then constructing a plan that actually has workable steps is always the hardest part. And I know that you put a lot of effort into making sure that we make that happen. But for me, even beyond this event, it'll be difficult for me to know. Well, with Valley Vision, very easy to know because I'm involved in this event. But in general, with respect to grant writing and winning grant funds, do I have all the information I need? It's difficult to know that for sure. It seems like defining the set, a complete set, is difficult sometimes. So your work here today has been helpful with respect to what Valley Vision needs, and just the overall project management aspects of it, and getting it kicked off and knowing what to do. Even if you don't know how to do it, that's fine. But those are the areas there where you say, okay, well, I need to flesh that out a little bit. I don't have a vision on how I'll get that done. But the worst thing is to not have a complete set in the first place and then put in an application that's just, only in hindsight you understand is sorely lacking. Okay, so the first part, the rubric is where it's at for me,
Cool.
and making
Yeah.
sure you have a complete set before you begin.
Yeah, I'd say on that note, Jarek, a few things. One is practice is going to be your best way to really like truly gain all that confidence. But the other piece is some of this is parallel pathing. So do your planning right now, figure out like, okay, I'm asking Tiffany to do this thing, this partner, I'm going to ask them to really drive X. And, Steph on the team is the one who builds budgets internally. So I'm actually going to work with her on the budget, and we're going to have a planning meeting tomorrow. But then as you're going, you're going to have some of those pieces like happening in parallel, and you might use placeholders in your writing for a little while. And we'll actually talk about this in a little while with the storytelling, but maybe right now in big capital letters, it says, X, Y, Z. And okay, X, Y, Z, I've got so-and-so working on, but I'm not going to let myself be held back from continuing to work on this because I don't yet have that data point, or I'm not quite sure what those 3 measures are. And so it really is, I know your point is still good. It's hard. It's definitely challenging, but let yourself kind of lean into the parallel pathing. And then those places that feel like we talked about the most nerve-wracking, I think Kayla was saying that, let those be the places where you give yourself the extra time or pull in the help that you can find.
Yeah, definitely. And this is not a counseling session, but yeah, for sure. And multiplying the effort is very important. All my efforts have been just one man, right? Just you're talking to it, every bit of it right now, right? So
Yeah.
it's doable for sure. But in terms of being able to show capacities like Alan spoke of in the last meeting, That's a very important thing for the process. And that for me, I guess, is the part where I have to kind of fill that out with respect to not the rubric itself. I mean, I feel like I can get through the rubric, but I'm slowly but surely learning that no matter how confident I am in myself or what I've already accomplished or feel I can accomplish, you know, being able to show capacity beyond me is going to be
Yeah.
necessary. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
That's the hard part.
focus in on that then. Give yourself the homework for the next few days of really brainstorming around that. And you know, one other trick is you can always give people earlier deadlines. So maybe you yourself want to focus on a deadline a week before it's due. And maybe you tell everyone, hey, we're aiming to have our proposal completed by May 9th. And so we'd really like to hear back from you by May 2nd or whatever it is. But maybe giving yourself a little extra time at the end will help provide that chance for final polish and cleanup and double checking and making sure you've really filled out every bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's more about multiplying the effort for me. I have to not be a one-man show as much, honestly.
Right.
That's what I'm getting from this. Thank you,
Awesome.
Sarah.
Yeah. All right, let's just get one more. Patricia, how about you? What did you work on during the planning exercise and what are you taking away so far?
I think for me, it's just really reflecting on, you know, we applied for the first round of funding. And so just getting that feedback and then continuing to work on, because we haven't followed up on the feedback, but we are going to be applying for round 2. But just one thing I've been thinking about is scalability. I mean, I'm thinking that it was scalability, but it could be other things. We haven't actually received feedback, but I have really been thinking about what kind of things could make our proposal stronger. One thing I'm really fortunate about with our organization is that we do have someone who kind of pulls all of our questions. Like we have a team that essentially works together on these grants. Everyone has a contribution to this, from the budget to the narrative to, you know, just the submittal of the proposal. So for me, it's more of that. Like that's what have just been reflecting on. Like, what can we do differently to make it a stronger proposal?
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we are going to go ahead and continue on, and get our break. There is a final part of thorough preparation that I want to hit on before we go on to storytelling. You should prepare very thoroughly for this RFP, but also be preparing for other avenues of funding in case this one doesn't happen, or hopefully it does happen and you want to be preparing for other sources of funding for implementation for this project. So this could be a whole workshop in itself, and we are not going to go into too much depth, but I did want to give you some guidance, especially for those of you who are newer to fund development and about how to find other grant opportunities. So as this slide notes, there are multiple different sources for funding, government to private foundations, to big corporations, to individual donors. And I do have today 3 fund finding recommendations for you. So 1, put your detective hat back on. All that research that we did for this proposal, you want to be doing that to find other opportunities. Let yourself follow the leads you find, go down the rabbit hole and see what interesting opportunities you can turn up. As you do that research, track it. A month from now, you're not going to remember what you were thinking today. And so make sure you're writing down those little notes and reminders so you can actually build on the research each time and keep track of what opportunities might be coming up or which organizations seem interesting. And there's lots of great like professional tools that you can use for this, but you can also just use like a very simple spreadsheet. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And then finally, build your network, reach out to people. We gave some examples already, but definitely take advantage of that professional and reciprocal and well-researched reach out to help you build out the people who might be able to help you. So as you begin dedicating time to searching for opportunities, here are 6 organizations to get you started. They are just a selection of ones that I picked. I used to always apply to Tykert. California Grants Portal is a really big place for a lot of different grant proposals, and then some other organizations and foundations in the general area. So this, not at all exhaustive, but if you haven't researched these, I'd say this could be a place that you start. And let's do one of these together. So I'll show you what I would do if I was going to go research it. So Sacramento Region Community Foundation. I'm going to click into their website. And I see right away that there's a section for nonprofits and opportunities. So I'm going to click into that. And there's a lot of different information that I should spend time kind of reading and processing to start to do some of the research about them and understand what they care about. But I'm also just kind of trying to get oriented quickly, find out if they have anything right now. And oh, here at the bottom is a funding and grants registry. And there's a number of different things listed here. Some of them are already closed or not available, but some of them might be interesting for me to look at. So I would go ahead and click into these and then explore them, see if they're ready, see if they align, but I would dig around and do some more work there. Let's do one more, the California Wellness Foundation, how about? Oops. So again, I'm just going to their website. Right away, I see in big red, apply for a grant. Let's see what is available there. Okay, so if you have not been working on this, you're probably not going to hit this round. It looks like there's one closing tomorrow, April 30th. But there's another round opening July 1 through 31st. So that's not too far off. Maybe there's something that I could hit in that window. I'm going to do a little more investigating to figure out what exactly they fund, get a sense of some of the things that they care about. So this is giving me some ideas. Equity in the nonprofit sector, reimagining social justice, economic mobility, youth justice. Some of these feel like they're probably a fit for various things your organization is working on. I want to find out what exactly do they want from me in order to fund something. And there's this letter of interest that I'm going to click. And right here, I have all of the information that I'm going to need for their online form. And I can start to figure out what I would need and plan ahead if I want to hit that July funding window. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to put in my tracker. What's the link for this? Remember that the July funding window is a window. I'm going to do more research, of course, to figure out like what types of things do they care about? What are they looking at? Where is there more information? But this is right here an opportunity that I could begin exploring and see if there's something that we could do for our organization. And again, there's fancy things you can use, but you can also just make a spreadsheet and keep track of things that you're looking at. This is just for sample purposes, but you want to make sure you track what's the organization, what's their contact information or website, when do they have application deadlines, and what are your notes? Who are you keeping in touch with? What kinds of things do they fund? And I'd say that some of the best organizations to put in your tracker are ones that don't even have live cycles right now, but you've found them, you see what they're funding, you notice that they generally run something every fall, or they tend to have RFPs in February, and you can maybe build a connection with them, build some rapport. You can start to think about what you would do in that timeline to be ready for it. And you can become very proactive instead of reactive. So you can start to think about what are the things that we want to be doing throughout the year to find funding for, and how do I plan ahead to know when there might be various cycles that align really well with that. And finally, we talked about networking. This is just another very tactical example. You could reach out to an organization and ask them, hey, you know, you do work here. It looks awesome. We do similar work. Here's a little bit about it. We were wondering when your next round of funding might be, or if you have other recommendations for funding that could help us with this kind of project. You are, again, trying to be super professional, authentic, and do your research. So, you know, don't tell them that you love their work they're doing in XYZ sector if they don't do any work in XYZ sector. It will not be a good look, and it just takes away from that really like genuine connection that you can make. All right, so we are going to go on to storytelling. I know that was like a super fast little primer, but I did want to make sure we spent a tiny bit of time thinking about other sources of funding. Does anyone have any questions on that just general research process as you start to incorporate that into your rhythms? I know we have a wide range here of folks. Some of you probably have lots of habits and time already dedicated to this. Some of you might just be beginning, but any questions that came up? All right. So that brings us to the final part of today's class. We talked about the importance of organizational effectiveness already. We talked about the importance of doing very thorough research and planning. And the final piece to the puzzle is that really great storytelling. And this is, again, the theme of the in-person workshops that we're doing at the end of May and in early June. And so today is sort of a teaser for that as you're getting started on your proposals. So what do you think are some components of a really good story and really good storytelling? Would love to get folks sharing, and just pop in, or I'll call on you again.
The human element, real people, real stories.
Totally. Yeah. Sarah, I saw you come off of mute too.
Just that it drives action. So if you can find a connection between the people that are reading your story and it moves them, like he said, with the human element, then it will drive action.
Yeah, that's great. What else?
I think what problem you're trying to solve and exactly how you're going to solve it and who is going to be impacted by that work.
Yeah, what is that case for change? What's the from to? That's great. What else is important for good storytelling?
Be descriptive so the person can visualize it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be very easy to forget that people don't know your organization, your community, all these things that you sort of assume that people just know. You need to tell them and be very clear. All right, so Chelsea mentioned the compelling case for change. That's your really clear problem and solution narrative. We also had from David the customer focus, really centering who you're serving. Earlier in the class, someone mentioned the importance of strong data, and I'd say this is also really, really important in your storytelling. Make sure that you've really got the evidence that backs up your claims. And then leverage all that research. So you know, in this case, that We Prosper Together is focused on some key areas in job creation. In their definition of disinvested communities, they are trying to have an impact in climate. And so use that research that you did and make sure that you're bringing your story to connect really well with that. And finally, reader empathy. And so you touched on this, Sarah, but you're trying to kind of bring things to life for the people reading your proposal. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but you want to really put yourself in their shoes. So Intuit, which is where I've worked for the last 8 years, is famous for our design thinking and something called Follow Me Homes. Has anyone heard of a Follow Me Home before? Okay, so this is where the product team goes to a person's home or workplace and silently watches them in order to learn about their problems and their needs. So maybe they're doing their taxes, maybe they're trying to run payroll, maybe they're doing some type of accounting. But this is not something that's taking place in the fancy Intuit offices. It's not an interview. It's a chance to really observe our customers and learn from them where they're actually doing their work and watching them actually do it. This is a really, really important input into the product design and development process, and it helps the product teams to make sure that the things that we're building are solving for actual customer needs. They also do interviews and test things with customers. This is just one input, but it really helps to create so much better products than if things are solutioned way over in an office and maybe from general knowledge rather than those really specific interactions with customers. And so similarly, your projects are going to be tremendously more successful if they're focused on the people being served right from the start, and ideally with those people as partners in the project development, which you saw asked for explicitly in the RFP. And I think it was you, Jarek, who talked about the like bringing in experience from the team from certain disinvested communities. I'd say this is that place where you want to bring that to the table and really focus on the customer. And you want to make sure that you're using that experience from the team to highlight the people you're serving, not to be obsessed with yourself, but to think about how your credibility as an organization is helping to empower the people that you are really trying to serve. So that co-creation is really key. Those authentic voices. I think people mentioned testimonials and other ways to sort of bring it to life. And then making sure that you're connecting that back to the right kinds of customers that your funder wants to fund.
Hey, Sarah, I'm gaining from this though that a story that I guess reaches the funders, proposed solution for the world, right? A story that reaches it passively might not be as impactful as one that has more of an active story. Like you said before, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you can deliver this just by not doing the things that have always been, or not doing the things that lead to disinvestment in these communities. All right, reversing the flow, right? But how does one do that in an impactful way? But really in the mind, it's really a passive sort of event. If it was just practiced differently, we get different results. Is it enough to say that? Is that impactful enough? Or does someone have to give a story that actually has an activity, an active saying, okay, we're going to go to this group, we're going to tell them this statement, and we're going to encourage them to do these things every time?
I think, yeah, Jarek, it's a good question. I think you kind of started to answer it yourself at the beginning of your question when you said, I'm starting to see that it's not enough to just be passive. We need to have an active story. So I'd say that's what I would lean into is take that RFP and the scoring that you got from your rubric, and you're going to see how you get points. And those points are tied to very specific active things, tying it to disinvested communities, tying to job creation. And then make sure you can answer each of those things specifically, which is going to require that active storytelling. So the focus on the customer in this case, the disinvested communities are kind of one of those prime customers that you're going to be thinking about. Who are you? How are you reaching them? There may be some others within that too, where you're thinking of like, how do I bring the partners to life who are offering new jobs through this project that we're doing? How do I bring people in these middle skill roles to life? And so that term, the customer, can be broad, but I would lean into being active and explicit in how you tie it to exactly what the proposal is asking for, and not just assuming that people will make those jumps.
Yep, I understand that. For me, I have to do some separation between the activities of the nonprofit, the project. I sometimes have a little bit of a difficulty focusing on, well, what is the actual project here? Is it the actual doing of things in the community in certain ways that actually raise all the boats, including the disinvested communities? Those are the disinvested communities.
I would say if it's that, then just make sure you address what part will help the disinvested communities explicitly.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
And then a mere change in the way things are done, saying, historically it's been done this way. Well, going forward, it will not be, isn't enough, right? You have to say more about, you have to be more active. I'm not going to ask you the same question twice. Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Yeah. I think your processing is getting you to a good place, and definitely sit down with some other folks at your organization and do some of that as whiteboarding. I think you'll find that helps a lot to kind of map it out.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
So compelling case for change. This is your good storytelling ingredient number 2. And this is really at the heart of any grant proposal. This is where you lay out the problem and your unique solution to solve it. And in the We Prosper Together RFP, there's some key problems already teed up for you, lack of quality jobs, need for a carbon neutral, climate resilient economy. There are lots of things laid out that you could kind of latch onto, but you want to make sure that you do that in a way that's specific, not just using all their buzzwords, but really making it clear how that problem is showing up in your community and then how you're addressing it. So what is your solution and how are you going to drive change with that solution? So you want to be very, very clear about that full story of your from to. Good storytelling ingredient number 3 goes hand in hand with that case for change. You want to put actual numbers and concrete data points in there. And like we talked about earlier, I think, David, you were the one who asked about like backing it up. This is the place where you can use very impactful numbers to back yourself up. You don't have to give paragraphs of explanation. If you get the right few data points, you can, save yourself a ton of time, but still hit your point home. And then this can also pair so well with that customer focus, where you can bring to life the data points with the color and story of the people who you are serving. And one note, we covered this tip earlier, but I'll say it again. If you're like not quite sure what something is yet, and you want to get that data point, but don't let that hold you back, like just put a placeholder in. Make sure you go fill it in later, but that can be bold or red or in caps or something so that you can work around it and kind of see how things work out. Because I definitely find that in the writing and editing process, sometimes they change for me. Like I might think that I'm really going to use X, but I don't need to go find, like totally hunt that data point down until I'm sure that that's really the one I'm going to use. And so I use lots of placeholders to help me kind of see how things are flowing. Is the story working? And then I can always fill them in later. Okay, we've talked about this now multiple times, so it's important. Use that research that you've done. You've got people on the other end of your grant proposals who are super familiar with that language, and you want to connect your story to those same words, phrases, data, so that they really feel like, hey, this is tapping into the things that we want to fund. And this will also help make your application stronger. It can save you time. You don't have to sit there trying to think of like, hey, how would I describe this thing? If there's a great way to describe it that you can build on already in the RFP or the economic plan. All right, so the final ingredient is to build empathy for your readers. So what does this mean? Crystal, what do you think it means to have empathy for your readers?
Hello. The way that I'm taking it is kind of making sure that your proposal's like really showing the stories of the people that you're trying to help, making it very like personal, making it like really hone in on the point of why you're doing it and how this community is going to be supported is kind of how I'm taking it.
Yeah, I think, that ties into, someone mentioned earlier, this idea of like bringing the story to life so that there's a lot of color about who you're serving as someone is reading it. So I think that's definitely a component to it. But let's imagine just for a second that we ourselves are the RFP readers right now. You guys, me, we've got a pile of applications to go through over the next few days. We have to get through these. How do we have, like, what would it look like to have empathy for ourselves? Like, what are we up against as readers that we would want to be thinking of as writers?
Would it be like keeping it to the point? Like, don't be making it fluff so they're not wasting their time reading the application. You want to make sure it's direct and your goal is pretty clear.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that ties in well with the second bullet here. And if you know the story of Goldilocks, the porridge that's too hot, the porridge that's too cold, you want to hit just right. And so you have to have enough information that your story is clear and it makes sense and I can follow it. But don't add extra random details that just aren't important, or like, excessive language to describe something that could have been described in a few sentences, because they are reading a huge pile of applications and they're going to be using a scoring rubric that looks a lot like the one that you created. And so you want to make it so easy for them to just check, 8 points, 8 points, 16 points. And so think about how you can make it just so easy for them to give you high marks. That was great. Patricia, you raised your hand at one point. Was that a question or a comment on
It
empathy?
was just a comment, you know, I think most folks are, well, I think everyone's touching on it, but it's just making sure that what is written, like we've really put thought into ensuring that we're addressing like what is on the RFP so that whoever is looking at it can clearly understand and follow like what you're proposing and that it clearly aligns with what you know, what it's asking for as well. So that makes it easier for them to move you along or just really understand like what you're proposing.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, we mentioned it earlier, but gray area is not great. Like maybe if you really think about it, you can see the connection. You don't want that to be what your readers are having to do. You want them to be like, oh, so obvious. Like I can see this direct connection to the thing that I'm scoring and asking for. The other thing is your readers are not familiar with all the details that you are. So they're not going to have like total context on the dynamics of your town and the great work your organization does, or the specific need that's most important for the group that you're serving. And so you do need to make sure that you're giving them enough information so that they know, like, this is where we can invest our money really well. And that's where, again, that Goldilocks baby bear is the thing to remember. My boss for the last 7 years at Intuit, he's a senior vice president, and he's one of the smartest people that I know. He's incredibly talented. And one of the things that I love working about him is that he doesn't pretend when he doesn't understand something. So even if everyone else is nodding along in the room, if he doesn't understand, he pauses and he says, hey, can you explain that? And he often says, can you explain that like you're explaining it to a 5th grader? And what he means is make it simple and understandable. Don't assume knowledge that people might not have. Don't use all the jargon and the big words. And so this is something I think about all the time in the work that I'm doing. I've used this in so many different papers I've written, but really think about how can you just explain it so like the average person, the average 5th grader could understand what you're saying and track along. You know, I think another, I won't compare it to a 5th grader, but like explain it to your partner, explain it to your grandma, explain it to someone who doesn't have all the intimate details and understand all the things that you do, and figure out how you can say something really specifically. And so this is really good advice to think about. And to think about as you ask people to read as well, is asking them to really, inviting them to really push on places where something just isn't quite clear or they don't understand it. All right, and the last one on here is to really review thoroughly. So we've talked about review several times today, but you will need to have time built in for this and time to step away. So don't look at it every single day from now until June 15. I'd say you need to have some pauses where you actually step away for a few days, then come back with fresh eyes. Otherwise, you're gonna miss some of the things because you're just too close to the story. So again, that's your clear timeline is important. The last thing I would say is just to remember that like your readers are people too. They have kids who might be sick, they have busy to-do lists, they have a lot going on. I'm sure that they're very wonderful people who want to fund the right things, both Valley Vision, but also just your readers in general for other grant proposals. But they have things that are going to interrupt them. They have things that they're going to be bringing to the table when they sit down to read those proposals. And so really put yourself in their shoes and think about how do you make sure that if they're interrupted in the middle of your RFP and they come back to it 4 hours later, you're being really clear in each question and answering that question fully, even if you might be thinking, but I answered that like 5 questions ago, I touched on it, they'll remember. You know, make it easy for them. This goes again back to that reader empathy. Make it really, really easy for them to connect the dots and know your story and follow it, even if there were interruptions or other things that might be distracting them. All right, any questions on anything there? Otherwise, we're going to go into our second exercise. All right, so this exercise, like the first exercise, is a chance for you to do some internal processing of the things that you're taking away. You can either focus on kind of writing down key takeaways, or this is a chance where you could actually practice and you could work on your problem statement. you could really kind of write out your solution approach. And I would almost recommend like bullet points for the sake of this exercise. Like, okay, our approach to addressing this is going to be X, Y, Z. We're going to do this feasibility study. We're going to work with this organization to do focus groups so we learn X, you know, just kind of list the things. And or you could work on expected outcomes. So measurable results that you're hoping that your plan will drive. So we'll take, why don't we take about all right, come on back. All right, as you think of your storytelling, what did you work on and make progress on, or what are some things that you're taking away that you really want to make sure you apply, or questions are welcome as well if anything came up for you. Jasleen, do you mind starting?
Yeah, I kind of, since I was doing bullet points, I started writing a problem statement and then I got to my solution approach. But I was focusing on like what is the need in the community, and then how I can incorporate different partners to address this need and like bring more jobs, and like how the money would be utilized. But yeah, I don't know if you want me to go into like specifics or speak about it more
No, that's
generally.
great. That's great. Did any questions come up, or are you feeling pretty confident?
I'm feeling pretty confident since this is like based on a project that I'm already working on. But one of them is how to really incorporate like the disinvested communities and kind of bring their voice to light instead of being so bogged down with like, we know that this industry needs more workers, and just trying to use like have it be more human centered instead of
Yeah.
just industry focused is one of my key takeaways I took from this workshop.
That's great. Good. George, how about you?
Yeah, this was a good exercise. I think it helped me. I think one thing we need to focus on this time around was the pre-development and not maybe getting too ahead of ourselves, and maybe the full vision of where we see it going. Maybe we can tease that in the proposal as like how we plan to scale this, but not necessarily focus on the full vision for this specific proposal. So that this was good to try to simplify things and really what can we do as a pre-development pilot project. So
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's definitely one of the tricky things about this proposal, I'd say, is because it's focused on pre-development, it can be hard to toggle between the pre-development part of your storytelling and the, if we do all that and then we go to implementation, what is the vision for the big picture impact? And you do want to hold and tell both, but it's tricky. So I think that your approach sounds great. And you can also even just try like a simple exercise of writing down that big whole vision, like briefly, like what are we hoping that this will drive ultimately? And then what are the concrete steps in your pre-development phase to get there? And then you want to make sure you kind of summarize that big picture vision, but really bring home the storytelling for pre-development.
excellent. Yeah, thank you.
All right, how about Dave?
Yeah, hi again. So for me, it's easy to just want to jump to the conclusion and skip well defining the problem and then the solutions and detailing the solutions on reaching and solving that problem, then get to the conclusion. So I wrote some things out, tried an example The problem being low income workers are looking for a new avenue to prosperity through a better job. Construction training provides a pathway for disadvantaged community members to a higher skill level and to move from farming to construction and earn a livable wage. The three outcomes are English as a second language, skills training, and a higher wage job placement.
It sounds like a great start to build from. I would say, just to push you a little bit there, is think about how you can make those more specific even to your area and your unique solution. And then just as a call out, and I'm sure you're thinking of this, but if your focus is only construction, then that would be qualifying you for the 8 points versus the 16. So just want to make sure you're remembering that. And it's not wrong necessarily, but just walk in with your eyes open on that and make sure that you're then hitting home every single other category to maximize your point value.
Yeah, we might not be going for construction because it's in the lower end. And so we're going to look at the 4 primary higher points and move towards there. But it's taking a little bit of work to get there, to have it fit the committee. The community doesn't fit those 4 categories very well, biotech and precision manufacturing. They're farm workers and they're starving. So it's a stretch.
That is for sure tricky. And I think that's you're highlighting one of the real challenges, that is that tension in grant funding, where there's things that a funder wants to fund and you might have a different reality. And that kind of sucks sometimes, because it does not feel great when you feel like you're like trying to fit the square peg in the round hole. And if they could just understand this other thing. And so, empathy for that, I have that too. And I would say that within that, then you want to make the best that you can. And you want to think like, are there ways you can get really creative? Is there some creative solution within farming that could actually fit to your, fit to your 4 criteria? Maybe there's some creative ways and some ways to enlist partners. Maybe the answer is that you give up 8 points and you say, this is the reality of what we've got, and we can write a really great proposal for this other thing. So I won't tell you what to do, but I acknowledge that that's a challenge, and it's always that trickiness of holding both the funder's priorities and the reality of your area.
I think a month ago it was a lot harder. Today, I'm much more hopeful. I read the first Yolo County project that you had up, and it nailed it and hit all the high points. So when I think along those lines and changing where we are in the environment, if we look at biomass and the biotechnology that goes into the soils and the training of the farm workers to actually be researchers that are doing better agricultural practices, there are 2 opportunities that I don't think I would have bridged 2 months ago that I can bridge today after this kind of class and exercise.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Well, good luck as you flesh that out.
I think you fleshed it out.
You've got all the hard work ahead of you. This is hard work for sure. Crystal, how about you? What are some of your takeaways, or what did you work on?
I kind of worked on the metrics. I'm pretty much like a data visual person, so I like to know kind of what things am I going to do and put together to prove the work. So I was just thinking of ideas that would be measurable, tangible, numerical, some maybe qualitative or quantitative data or measurements that I could use. So I was just thinking, so our focus is increasing employment opportunity within Latino communities in a nutshell. And so it would be like, how many new Latinos have we employed, and what sectors are they, and what sectors are, or what kind of feedback did we get, kind of things like that are more so like gonna tell us a little bit more about how the project did compared to like writing the problem or the solution. It's kind of like I wanted to delve a little bit more on how we're gonna do it compared to the before and end product of it.
Yeah, great. Let's get one more, Sarah.
Yeah, a lot of what everybody else has been saying also was something that I kind of went back and looked at how I had described our program and what the problems were. And we do need to kind of approach it a little bit more from a storytelling. I love how you broke out the problem statement, and then you have the solutions and what the outcomes will be. So I just kind of adjusted my problem statement to make it a little more of a story instead of just like data, here's the group, here's how we're going to solve it, you know?
Awesome.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, that sounds like you're on the right track. All right. As we finish up, a few more points to make. We've talked about this already, but I want you to remember it and take it away. Grammar and typos really do matter. And so don't submit applications with typos and grammatical errors. And if you know that you tend to be someone who, makes errors, and we all do typos, but make sure that you check and you have someone else read who can really check for those things, because this is something that can really hurt your credibility. And it seems so silly, but like when you read a document and there's typos in it, it just chips away at how you think about that person or organization. Like you wonder, like, are they thorough? Are they careful? And so this is just like a little thing that can have a really big impact on you. And so get rid of them. Make sure that you're checking really carefully. I also wanted to mention 4 other proposal pitfalls. We've touched on pieces of these, but just to make sure you really take it away. Not having key details that are asked for is going to hurt you big time. Like if they're filling out that rubric and you're getting zeros on an 8-point question, that is going to hurt you and hurt your chances of getting funded. And so make sure that you really check and triple check those RFP requirements and you give them what they are asking for. Secondly, make sure that you are writing for that 5th grader and really avoiding the jargon. So you don't want to be too buzzwordy. You don't want to have too much technical language or insider speak. You want to be really clear and make sure that even though you're using all of those great terms from the research you did, you're not like abusing them as you put them in there. You're not just sprinkling them in to like have those words show up, but you're actually using them appropriately. I'd say 3rd is weak outcomes. So vague or unmeasurable results. And this points to 2 things. 1 is funders want to fund good outcomes. And 2 is if you are not putting good outcomes in, it makes me wonder if you know how to drive good outcomes. So are you an organization that knows how to focus in on like what you're trying to affect or enable or change? And if you're not able to articulate what those things are that you're trying to do, it's going to make me question your overall credibility also. And then finally, we've covered this several times, but avoid that last minute rush. It is always the day where you're submitting something important that your internet will go out or something crazy will happen. You'll have a storm, you'll have something that is like ruins your process, makes you super stressed out. And it can also really hurt your time for polishing. If you're really last minute, you might miss those typos. You might miss the chance to really make sure that application is super strong. As you think about your drafting, I'd also say some final checklist items to make sure that you budget in for and think about for your timeline. Repetition doesn't ruin the prayer. So yet again, we will remember that we should address all elements of the RFP. You should pull that rubric out and you should actually score yourself. So don't just do the check boxes, but if it's 6 points, if it's 8 points, ask yourself, did I hit it? Give yourself time for proofreading. And then let's just put a number to it. Get at least 3 fresh eyes on this thing, potentially more, as you think about all the different partners and collaborators you have. But get people who can review and give you feedback and actually ask for feedback. So don't just say like, hey, can you read this? And you don't give them direction, but say, hey, can you read this? Here's the scoring rubric. Can you read this and let us know which questions are not clear? Any questions that you think don't score the maximum amount? And can you really look for any places where we can kind of punch up how we're talking about our connection to, these job sectors? Whatever the key things are, give your readers direction for what you want them to read for. And then make sure you submit early so that you can avoid technical issues and not have to have a scramble at the end. All right, any questions, any last questions that have come up throughout the day?
Sure, I've asked other people this and just want to hear your input on this. The chicken and the egg question. In our county, without sufficient housing, they cannot attract things like people in those tradable industry sectors or opportunity sectors like school teachers or doctors or in anything that's listed among those 8. Can you make a case for housing and say childcare to have a project that addresses those so that you can attract those workers or keep those workers in your community?
Great question. Someone earlier in this session mentioned childcare. Sarah, was that you? And you mentioned a place where you got verification that that was okay. Could you tell us about that?
So I attended, instead of Sacramento County, because I had missed it, I attended the Yolo County in-person workshop from the first go round, from the first application process. And they did have a whole slide on that, like, oh, you don't see your exact need here. Well, there are multiple supporting, areas that are considered for these industries. And one of them was housing, I believe. There was childcare, things like that. So you do need to have some of those support things. So I would suggest, I did during my process of applying, I contacted Valley Vision directly just to confirm. And I could probably look up who I wrote to. I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, you definitely can ask questions. I think it's up till a certain point in time. But right now we're within that area.
And they replied to you, Sarah, and said that that was fine.
Yeah, I specifically asked, like, can you hone in on this one area with all of the economic stuff you did and just show me this area? And they were like, we don't quite do that. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, can you give me your source data? They're like, no, but you can ask, they'll respond.
So I would say, I can't speak to the details of like, what you should submit and what is okay or not. But I think what you said, David, of like, make the case is the key no matter what. So you need to show your thinking and how it connects and not hope that someone will like make the jumps as they read or have mercy on you or think that sounds awesome. If you think you have a strong case to be made that ties in really directly, then make the case. But I would do your homework and make the case really, really clear and strong and explicit so that it ladders in very clearly, so that you're really tying to those outcomes of like, hey, if we have, and I'm making this up, if we had childcare for this group and better housing here, all of a sudden we have 3 organizations who have these jobs that they can't fill, but then we could fill them. And that would increase our capacity for this many, jobs in biotechnology and business services in this area. So by focusing on this, while it feels indirect, the outcome that we'd be driving is X. And so our pre-development is to figure out, can that actually work? What would that look like? I'm totally making it up right now, but see where you can like track people along to the end-to-end story and connect all those dots. And I would say, try to reach out directly to Valley Vision for some clarification also, because they have that Q&A document that's open. And so if there's places that you're not sure, I don't know what they will say, but I would ask. Dave, and then Kayla, sorry, I think you might have been first, but we'll come to you next.
So Renee did give me feedback in the workshop about the difference between filling jobs and creating jobs. This grant is to create and generate new jobs. Filling existing jobs, teachers, nurses, and so on, they really don't care about. And this grant doesn't fit that. You're not eligible.
Well, so just let's go back to our sources again, because I think there's a few things that you just said that are important. I'm trying to find my Q&A. That's not it. Here it is. So there is a question that was added yesterday. Are projects advancing pathways to existing jobs eligible for funding? And the answer is projects that advance accessible pathways to quality jobs identified in the RFP are eligible for funding. And so I can't speak to, again, I am not Valley Vision, but I'm going to go off of what is here in the Q&A and go by those definitions on pages 4 and 5 and 6 to 8, and see if I can draw that explicit connection to say, hey, training for these existing jobs in those priority sectors seems like is possible to make that case.
Yeah, I think it's weaker on the points, but it's possible to make that case.
Yeah, so you're very good point on, you know, you want to be explicit and you want to be clear and you want to connect the dots. And so it's not saying it's not possible, but you might have a stronger application if it's more explicit. Kayla?
I think related to those last two questions, I'm just curious to hear from your experience having applied for lots of grants, like when you might be sort of self-evaluating that, oh, it really feels like I'm making a stretch, or I might be getting less points here and here, like the project that I really need to fund maybe isn't best matched to this grant source, but this is, you know, a great source of money. So then it's like, well, when do you make that sort of economical decision for yourself of like, maybe it's not worth my time, or maybe it is worth my time? Just any tips that you
Yeah.
have from your own experience on that?
I'd say that, you know, it's so tricky and it depends so much. Like there's a lot of different factors to consider. There's like, what are the requirements? Like how long is an application going to take me? And I would say in general, like something I always used to have is sort of like an evergreen case for change for some of the things that we were trying to get funded. And I had my, you know, here's the problem, here's what we want to do to address it, here's my data points. That was something that I would borrow from for multiple applications. I would customize it depending on the questions, but I had that written and ready to go. And so it was not like a starting from scratch every time there was a new proposal, which was very helpful. That then would allow me to sometimes see something and be like, hey, I'm not quite sure if we fit on this one, but I've got my story ready and I'm going to go ahead and like make the case as best I can. And it's not, you know, this is how much time it will take me, and that cost benefit is worth it. On the flip side, sometimes the cost benefit is not worth it. And it's like, I know, like I'm reading this rubric and I think I'm getting zeros across the board. I don't think we're going to apply, because if I do apply, then that might also hurt my credibility a little, because it's like people will be like, that organization, I thought they really got it and they're totally off track here. So you want to think about that too. It's really a judgment call. If you feel like you can make a case and you think you hit some of these very strongly and you have the bandwidth to apply, do it. If you realize like, honestly, you just don't fit and you're not meeting the funding criteria, then like, I don't think you will probably get funded. So maybe you can spend your resources on a different opportunity or finding a different opportunity where you might be more likely to get that funding. So unfortunately, there's not a perfect answer. I know that it's so tricky, but I would say there's a few, you're just kind of always weighing that cost benefit and then deciding like, honestly, like, can you make the case? And maybe pull someone else into it with you to do some of the thinking. So a partner at your organization where you can say like, let's look at this rubric together. Let's see how we think we would do. Is this one worth it right now? Or should I spend my energy looking for something else that's a better fit for this? Tricky. Any other questions? All right. So your next steps are to do all your planning, make your rubric, build your timeline, send out your emails to the people who you need help from. Go ahead and get started. And I would encourage you to have a strong draft by the time you come to those in-person workshops if you're going to. So really put in the work to do a lot of the upfront work ahead of time. And then I hope to see you in either Colusa or Sacramento at the end of May or early June for the workshops. And Chester is actually dropping the interest form into the meeting chat right now. So you can go ahead and fill that out if you would like to come. And then a second link is about to appear in the meeting chat also. This is the survey for this course. And I would just ask if you could just please fill it out. Your feedback is so valuable and appreciated, and I will take that as I think about developing the in-person course as well as any other future classes. So please just take a few minutes now. We'll maybe give 3 or 4 minutes for folks to fill those out. But go ahead and register for the in-person if you can make it, and then fill out the survey for this course, and then we'll wrap things up. Oh, and Kayla, you've got a great question. The format for the in-person storytelling workshops, are we workshopping drafts? So I'm still in development. I'm taking some of the learnings that I have from all of you to go into that. I would say there will be workshopping on your draft. Some of that might be just like you working or you working with a partner or something. And then there will also be other types of workshopping where we're working off of like other scenarios and like talking as a group, like how would we react to this? How would we score this? How would we think about this? So there's definitely places where you, or maybe the person next to you would be bringing parts of your story in, not necessarily everyone, and it might not be as a whole large group, but there will be workshopping opportunities. Feel free to ask any other questions too while you're filling out surveys, but I also want to not distract you because I'd love to get your input, and I know it can be easy to just exit out and walk away, but it would be great if you could fill out the survey. All right. And hopefully if you haven't pushed submit yet, you will finish it off, but thank you all for coming. Appreciate the time that you spent today. I wanted to go back to just one thing that we were just talking about, which was the, some of those indirect connections. So childcare or housing, and just make sure if you are deciding to tackle one of those, that you are still being super explicit to connect the dots to how it increases the job creation in those sectors and plugs people into those quality job positions. So you don't want to just kind of focus in on those separately. You'd want to make sure that you're really connecting those dots. So wanted to finish with that. Thank you all for your time. And it is really great to have such a engaged group, great questions. And I wish you best of luck as you write and work on your proposals.